Welcome to the third and final video in our Gift Along series. I'm your last minute gift quilter, Angela Walters, and in this episode I'm going to show you how to make an easy to piece quilt that looks a lot harder than it actually is. That's right, I said it's the last of the series, but don't cry. Don't cry. You can still get your quilty fix by checking out new episodes of my series, The Midnight Quilt Show, and there's a link to it in the description box below. So here's the deal. I love to give gifts. Most quilters do, but what I don't understand is why I always wait to the last minute to think, oh, you know what would be nice? To make a quilt. Never mind, the big day is next week. I've decided at this moment that I want to make a quilt from start to finish. Any of my midnight quilters out there know what I'm talking about? If you've made a last minute quilt, tell me about it in the comments below. But even though I waited till the last minute, I'm not a glutton for punishment. This pattern is beginner friendly, stash friendly, it's expanded quilt, which means you can customize the size, and the pattern is free for a limited time, so make sure you download it. Get ready to practice your best. Oh, I hope you love it, because it took me forever, but it's okay, because I love you. Face. So here's the crisscross quilt. It kind of reminds me of something. Oh, I know what it is, the Modern X quilt. On the Midnight Quilt Show, I made a quilt with a similar technique, but completely different layout. This one I think will be much easier. I love how the fabrics look randomly placed and how cutting on the diagonal makes it look so complex. I'll show you how easy it is. To make this quilt, you need some binding fabric and some pre-cut 2.5-inch strips. I'm gonna use solid fabrics because I know it's gonna let the quilting shine. I'm gonna pick 3 strips of fabric and sew them together into a set. But I'm gonna offset them just slightly so I get more of an angle at the end. For the next strip set, I'm gonna do the same thing, but they're gonna angle in the opposite direction. This is so important. If you don't do this, your quilt isn't gonna turn out quite right. Once they're pieced together, you should have 2 strip sets that look like this. I'm actually gonna need 3 sets though, because you're gonna cut them each in different ways. The first set, you're gonna cut a 45-degree line, measure over 13 inches, and cut another 45-degree angle the same direction. I'm going to repeat along the set. On the second set, I'm going to do the same thing, except my lines are going to angle the opposite direction. These will end up mirroring the first set. On the last strip set, I'm going to cut 45-degree angles, but I'm going to change direction so that I end up with triangles. Now it's time to put all these pieces together to make one of the rows of our quilt. For the first row, I'm going to pick pieces that are all the same, and I'm going to line them up. Then put a triangle on each end. Now all that's left to do is to sew it together for my first row. The second row is going to be made just the same as the first, except with the different sets. So now I'll end up with lines that angle the opposite direction. Now, if I were to sew them together just like this, I'm going to have a lot of seams that are supposed to match up. But the person that wrote this pattern is a freaking genius. They've made it where you offset the rows just slightly so that none of the points have to match. You know what that means, right? Quick piecing. Oh, these seams, they don't match because they're not supposed to. Oh, best words in the English language. Once I sew those 2 rows together, I'm going to repeat, adding more rows, offsetting every other one until I have the finished quilt top. Now, if you're making a different size, you might add more rows. Just be sure to check out your pattern for the exact number. Once the quilt top is finished, I'm going to trim off those edges, make it square. So now it's time for the best part, the machine quilting. So I'm going to go ahead and base this quilt sandwich, and if you're not sure how to do it, don't worry. I have a video that will show you exactly how to do it. Just find that in the description box below. Okay, I may be in a little bit of a rush, but I love the machine quilting, so I'm going to put a little bit more effort into that part. I think I'm going to try out some of my favorite quilting designs that will work best in 2-inch sashings. Now, you don't have to put this much detail to it. You can keep it more basic. Why would you? It's a lot more fun to quilt. So let's get started. In the first strip, I'm quilting a nice wavy back and forth line that's going to add a beautiful texture to the quilt. But at random points, it's going to run into the line I just quilted and bounce back and forth. It's these touches, where it either touches the edge of the block or another line, that gives it a beautiful texture. In the next strip, I'm going to get a little more fancy by quilting a variation of a feather. Starting in one corner, I'm going to quilt a petal that goes out, travel back around, and quilt my second one. I'm going to repeat with a third one, but instead of going into my 4th petal, I'm going to quilt my next group of 3, but going in a different direction. So I'm going to quilt these petals in groups of 3, changing direction on every 3rd petal, and it's going to give it just a different kind of shape. And who doesn't love wishbone? In this variation, I'm quilting 2 wishbones, but I'm spreading them out and offsetting them so that it creates a really neat look. Starting from one edge, I'm quilting the first part of my wishbone, but I'm spreading them out pretty far. That's gonna leave me room to add my second when I come back. When I get to the edge, I'm gonna travel along the seam and quilt my second part of the design, quilting the wishbones so that they end up in between the ones I previously quilted. Okay, I am clearly on a machine quilting roll. All I have to do now is finish quilting it, add a little binding, and this gift will be ready for that special person. There is nothing like that feeling of completing a quilt. I just wonder why I always wait until the last minute to start them. Well, I guess if I'm thinking, it could be because I tend to get a little bored. The shorter amount of time that it takes to finish a project is the less amount of time that I can get distracted by the lure of new projects. I have plenty of quilt coffins that hold unfinished quilts. You know what I'm talking about. Oh, okay, sure. You call them plastic organizers. I'm just calling it what it is. It's a quilt coffin. Or I guess the reason I wait till the last minute is I love the thrill of starting a project with only days to spare, only to realize that I've run out of fabric halfway through the quilt. Or it's the joy of beginning to machine quilt a special Christmas gift on Christmas Eve, and then to realize that the thread doesn't work. Just a public service announcement, if this happens to you, call your quilting friends, they will help you out. Jeannie really saved my bacon that year I started a gift for my father-in-law, only to realize the thread was not working. I had to drive 45 minutes to get to her house, I interrupted her family get-together, but I got the thread and I finished that sucker at 3 a.m. in the morning. Hey, I would have done it for her. I just hope he still has that quilt. That was a lot of work. That's a true story, by the way. But whether you're a last-minute quilter like me or a quilter that starts your quilts on time and finishes it on time, like a magical freaking unicorn with a label and a sleeve, this is sure to be a quilt that anybody would love to receive. Just don't forget to practice. Here, this quilt took forever, but it's okay because I love you, even if you're giving it to yourself. Oh, thank you so much for the beautiful quilt. I can't imagine how much work it took. That's okay, Angela, you're worth the effort. Oh, Angela, that's why I know you love me so much. I can't wait to use it. Well, this crisscross quilt concludes our holiday gift along. Let me know what you thought. Are you inspired? Do you plan on giving away your gifts or keeping them for yourself? There's no shame in keeping them. I also have a link below with more holiday inspiration, so be sure to check that out. Don't forget, you can also subscribe to Midnight Quilt Show, where you can find all sorts of quilty inspiration with new episodes, which means you can binge watch for hours. Details below. And Blueprint is constantly updating their YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe here so you don't miss a thing. And here's to some happy, giftable quilting. Happy holidays!